There are a lot of things we do in this hobby that actually make our aquariums worse instead of better. Most of them start as good intentions, things we think will help, until they slowly start causing problems. So today, we are going over the things you need to stop doing to your aquarium before it's too late. Floating plants are great for many reasons. They absorb excess nutrients, they provide shade for low light plants, and they are a great food source for shrimp since shrimp feed on the tiny organisms living on the roots. They can even prevent fish from jumping out by giving them a sense of cover. But floating plants can also become a huge problem. I've noticed that a lot of people, especially beginners, love keeping floating plants because they are so easy to grow. And that's true. They do really well because they take CO2 directly from the surface, which gives them a big advantage over other plants. The problem is, that same advantage makes them grow way faster than anything else in the tank. Before you know it, they've taken over the entire surface, blocking light from reaching your other plants. Stems and carpets that depend on bright light start melting, and your aquascape loses all its color and density. Another issue is that when floating plants multiply, they also consume most of the available nutrients, leaving very little for the rest of your plants. That's why it's rare to see floating plants in high-tech tanks. They don't really belong in setups where light balance and nutrient distribution are so important. If you want to keep them in a separate tank where they can grow freely without hurting your main aquascape. But if your goal is a healthy planter aquarium with good lighting and balance, it might be time to stop using floating plants so much. If you use a CO2 injection system, you probably know how frustrating glass diffusers can be. They look great in an aquarium, but disconnecting them from the tubing is a nightmare. The pressure inside the line makes it almost impossible to remove them safely, even when the system is turned off. I broke several diffusers trying to clean them, and even managed to injure myself a few times in the process. For a while, I gave up on glass diffusers completely and switched to plastic ones just to avoid the hassle. But one day, I read a comment from one of you guys that changed everything. They said they never disconnected their diffuser at all. They just removed it from the tank and placed it straight into the cleaning solution. The pressure inside the CO2 line keeps the liquid from entering the diffuser, so it cleans perfectly without damaging anything. I tried it and it worked better than I expected. Now I do that every time. It saves time, avoids leaks, and keeps everything intact. Just remember, if you use bleach as your cleaning solution, always rinse it well and use a dechlorinator before placing it back into the tank. It's a simple change, but one that will save you a lot of broken glass diffusers and frustration down the road. If you are enjoying the video, remember to like and subscribe. And thank you so much to everybody who has been subscribing lately. Sometimes we try out new plants that end up being more trouble than they are worth. Maybe they grow too fast and start choking out the others, or maybe they just don't look the way you expected. Either way, if you ever need to remove a plant from your aquarium, don't uproot it. Cutting it a little below the substrate is a much safer way to do it. Most active substrates are made of small, porous granules that allow waste to sink down and settle underneath the surface. When you uproot plants, all that trapped waste suddenly releases into the water column, and if you do it often enough, you are almost guaranteed to trigger an ammonia spike. It can make your water cloudy, stress your fish, and even crash your cycle if the tank is small. By cutting the plants slightly below the surface, you avoid all that mess, and since the stem left behind won't get any light, it won't grow back. Over time, if your substrate is getting old, the granules can start to break apart, especially on the surface. When that happens, it's a good idea to remove that top layer to keep it filtering properly. I actually made a small vacuum that is very good for this. It's perfect for removing debris or bad soil without removing water from the tank. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. I see this mistake all the time, and I've even seen people recommend it: replacing filter media. It might sound like regular maintenance, but it's actually one of the worst things you can do for your aquarium stability. Your filter media is where most of your beneficial bacteria live, the bacteria that keep your water cycle and safe for fish. When you replace that media, you're basically throwing away your biological filtration and forcing your tank to start over. I've been using the same filter media for over 5 years, and my tanks are perfectly healthy. The only thing I ever do is dip it gently in all tank water a few times to remove waste on the surface. And even then, I only do that every 4 months or so. Don't use tap water though, since chlorine can really hurt your bacteria colony. Good filter media can last for years, and as long as water keeps flowing through it, there's no reason to replace it. If it ever starts to crumble or lose shape, you can replace just a small portion at a time, but never all at once. Stability comes from consistency, and keeping your filter media long term is one of the easiest ways to protect that. I've mentioned this before, but it's something I really want to repeat. Stop feeding your fish so much. I read a comment recently that said to feed fish several small meals a day, and it got me thinking. I understand the logic behind it, but in a real aquarium, it often causes more problems than it solves. I feed my fish every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and so on, and they are healthier than ever. The problem with feeding too often is that not every fish eats at the same pace. Fast swimmers eat first, while slower or shy fish barely get anything. If you feed small portions multiple times a day, it's almost impossible to make sure everyone eats evenly. Then there's the time issue. If you have multiple tanks, feeding several times a day can quickly turn into a full-time job. Plus, fish don't rely only on what you feed them. Most species are omnivores, which means they'll also eat algae, biofilm, and the tiny microorganisms naturally growing in your aquarium. Skipping a day of feeding actually encourages this natural behavior and keeps your tank cleaner. Less food means less waste, less algae, and overall healthier fish that actively forage instead of just waiting to be fed. I've been feeding this way for years, and it's one of the simplest changes that's made a huge difference in the long-term stability of my aquariums. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for your aquarium is to stop doing so much. If there's something you've stopped doing that made a difference, tell me in the comments. It might help someone else too.